That Sober Guy podcast contains adult content, merciless truth, and emotional nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
I'm Shane Ramey. You're listening to That Sober Guy podcast, and we help people stay sober. If it's your first time listening, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here today. If you're looking for ways to quit drinking, you can go to thatsoberguy.com. All kinds of resources there. Be sure to follow us also on Instagram at That Sober Guy Podcast and on X at That Sober Guy Pod. All the links from today's show will be in the show notes, so they're very easy for you to find. So glad you're here today. I'm so excited to talk about today's topic. It's going to be lots of fun. I wanted to just lighten it up a little bit today, man. So the title today, 40 80s and 90s Christmas gifts you might not have gotten, but still secretly wish you did. And I know there's a couple for me, and this episode was actually inspired by a post that I saw on Instagram that I think I put on my story as well. But it was a picture of a G.I. Joe aircraft carrier, and it said, man, 39 years since this one came out and you still haven't gotten it for Christmas or something like that. That was one of my big gifts that I always wanted as a kid. And I got a lot of great things for Christmas as a kid, don't get me wrong, but never did get the aircraft carrier. So kind of inspired me to lighten it up a little bit as we get closer to Christmas and talk about some of the best 80s and 90s Christmas gifts. So I hope you have a good time with this one today. Sit back and enjoy it. First, a couple of quick announcements. If you would do me a huge favor and do yourself a huge favor as well, join our free Sober Guy men's community, the Victory Circle. You can sign up today and connect with other sober dudes from all over the country. We talk about sobriety, fitness, health and wellness, entrepreneurship, being better fathers, being better husbands, obviously how to stay sober, what we're doing, what's working, what's not working. And we have a great time doing it. There's lots of great dudes in there. So I'd love for you to join the Sober Guy men's community, the Victory Circle. And then as well, also you can join and register for our free monthly workshop, which actually is this Wednesday, December 18th. And the topic for this month is going to be sober holiday toast and reflection. So we're going to lighten it up a little bit here too, just being the holidays. And it's going to be a kickback, laid back little get together where we can have a sober toast. So I'm going to invite everyone to bring their favorite NA non-alcoholic drinks. And we're gonna sit back. We're gonna share accomplishments, connect with each other. We're gonna talk about how we're getting through the holidays without alcohol, and we're gonna have a great time doing it. So I would love for you to join us there as well. And both of these links to join the Victory Circle, as well as register for the free monthly workshop, you can find both of those in the show notes of today's episode, or you can go to thatsoberguy.com and you can find it there as well. All right. So like I said, I wanted to practice, I didn't say this yet. I said, like I said, I wanted to have a light, fun, good-hearted podcast today and talk about some old school toys that we used to enjoy and love. And maybe we got, maybe we didn't, from Santa or from Christmas, from our parents, whatever that looked like, from grandma and grandpa, always good times. But as I got to think about this a little bit, going through this list, I had a great time putting the list together. But I also was thinking about practicing that childlike spirit. And I promise you, I'm only going to get deep for about 2 minutes and then we're going to have some fun here. But that childlike spirit is so important. And I don't know if you remember that feeling as a kid, that feeling of freedom, that feeling of peace, that feeling of excitement as Christmas came around. And it was just, for me, it was just a feeling of freedom, man. I remember going to my grandma and grandpa's house to see family and friends that were there and just hang out and get gifts and eat a bunch of chocolate. I remember I would stuff my pockets with, grandma would leave candies around or, food or whatever. I'd be stuffing my pockets with the candy afterwards, man. And man, it was just such a good time. And even if, your childhood wasn't perfect, mine definitely was not perfect, but we had a lot of good times, especially around the holidays. Even if it wasn't perfect though, I'm sure that there had to be some time in there when, you really expressed and felt that childlike spirit of freedom. And I just want to help us today with this episode and talking about and remembering and reminiscing about some of the old school toys and that we, saw and got during the holidays. I want to help us see. And when I say us, I'm talking myself, man. Like I'm not talking at you guys listening right now. I'm talking with you. Like we're in this together. And so I want us to see that we can find that again as adults, even through amongst all the, the crap and the chaos and the stuff going on in the world and our jobs and just all the stuff that we're doing. And I know the world can feel so heavy sometimes, and maybe we're going through, broken relationships, or we lost the job, or, it's like, I know for me, I know this maybe sounds funny to some, but we put our dog down two years ago, Brody, like the day before Christmas. So as much as I love Christmas, man, I'm always remembered of that Christmas 2 Christmases ago of having to make that terrible and tough decision to let Brody go. He was 14 and it just happened. He got super sick and finally, he couldn't live anymore. And he was in some pain. And so it happened a day before Christmas, man. I guess it was the 23rd. So day before Christmas Eve, but right around that time. And some of those feelings come up, man. I was thinking about it today. So during the holidays, man, it can be tough, but there's a lot of good memories and at the same time. And I just want us to remember that we can find that childlike spirit again. You have to let go. We have to become like children again, in a sense. And it doesn't mean be immature jackasses, although that can be kind of fun sometimes too, as long as we're not, doing nothing too stupid, but we can find that childlike spirit again. And I was just reminded as I was kind of putting this together today of Matthew 18, 1-4. It says, at that time, the disciples came to Jesus saying, who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? And calling over to him a child, Jesus put him in the midst of everyone and said, truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. For whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. And I love that, because what it says to me is all the responsibilities, all the things, all the crap that we carry from our past. Maybe it's trauma, or maybe it's you're broken, or you're not feeling good enough, or whatever it is that you're going through. Maybe the holidays brings up some negative feelings, or it's just a tough time. Maybe finances is tough. I know, like it is for a lot of people. It's, man, if we humble ourselves and if we let go and if we remember this childlike spirit that we once had as kids, when all of that other crap, we weren't conditioned for it yet. And as we got older, and, to no fault of our parents, I'm a parent myself, but we become conditioned to the world, and we become conditioned to the things and the wants and the needs and the materialism and the media and we have to have it all together, and we got to be perfect and all this stuff. And man, it says right there, Jesus said, like, whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven, is the best. And so he's asking us to come back to that original state of purity, of childlike spirit, childlike connection to him. And in that, man, okay, so I promised I wasn't going to get too deep. I know we did there for a second, but man, I got to set that up, because in that brings us back around to the 40 greatest 80s and 90s Christmas gifts that you might not have gotten, or maybe you got to give some of these, or maybe today you're focused on giving. And I would never, write this down or plan on saying this. This is 100% spur of the moment. I just want to give a shout out to Jake out there. Jake from the islands in Hawaii, man. And Jake's followed the show for a long time. And I don't know if he'll listen to this or not, but I know he does listen in sometimes. But he did one of the nicest things not too long ago, just a couple of weeks. And it was super random. And I just, all of a sudden, my Venmo, which I don't really use that often, it just went off. I got a little alert and it said, you've got $50. And I was like, what? Who just sent me $50? And I was looking, and it was Jake. And I was like, bro, I said, really? And so I think I hit him up on Instagram or something. And When I realized it was him, I wasn't sure who it was at first. And then I recognized, oh, it's Jake, dude. Okay. And we know each other just from the podcast and chopping it up a little bit. And I know he's doing some great things out in Hawaii, and he's just a good dude. And I said, bro, you didn't have to do that. And he goes, man, I love the work you do, man. I appreciate you so much. And I wanted to show a little gratitude to you. So that was so awesome, right? So that $50 has been sitting in the Venmo account, right? And fast forward to a couple days ago, our gym, I saw a message that they put out that said, hey, there's two needy families here, and we're putting together some food and some Christmas gifts for some of their kids and the parents as well. And we'd love it if you're a part of our gym. We'd love to have your support and help you support. And so here's a sign up sheet if you want to get a gift for the families. And so I was like, man, as soon as I saw that, I jumped right on it because, and I talked to Cash. I said, hey, bud. So we were looking at the list. I said, hey, there's a kid on here who's 8 years old, and it says maybe he likes Pokemon. So what do you think about getting a Pokemon like toy for him or something? And he goes, oh man, yeah, that'd be awesome, man. And I'll write him a card and I'll tell him Merry Christmas and whatever. And I said, man, that's so awesome. So we're gonna do that, right? So here's where this all comes together. So I thought to myself, man, that was so cool of Jake to do that. Man, why don't we take that $50 that was in there and we'll kind of come together, me, sober guy, Cash, and Jake, and we'll take the $50 and we'll buy this kid, this 8-year-old kid who doesn't have a lot this Christmas, a cool Pokemon toy. So we ordered that today. And Cash is going to write a cool card and we'll put it in a little bin. And man, it's nothing huge. It's a drop in the hat, right? But maybe to this kid, it means the world to get a Pokemon gift or something. So I just want to say thank you to Jake for being so thoughtful and kind and throwing, that $50 is just like a little, man, thank you to myself, to sober guy. And then, dude, it's so cool to be able to work together and come together and then take that. And then now we're buying this kid, this 8-year-old, a toy for Christmas. So Jake, thank you, man. And, so cool. I appreciate you listening and so happy that, we're able to kind of come together in the giving, in the spirit of giving, in the spirit of Christmas and give a cool gift to a cool 8-year-old out there who's into some Pokemon stuff. So, good stuff, man. Wasn't planning on talking about that today, but hey, it came up. So, there you go. Okay. So let's talk about the 80s and the 90s, right? They were such a magical time for Christmas, if you remember. And I don't know if you follow any of those old accounts like the vintage 90s or vintage 80s accounts, and they'll have pictures and videos of old Christmas stuff. And if you're like me, you feel that nostalgic and that pure awesomeness that it was in the 80s and 90s of growing up. And it was such a fun time. And so, speaking of this list of gifts, though, maybe, and trust me, you're going to recognize some of these and go, oh, dang, I remember that, just like I did as I was kind of going through them. But maybe you got some of these. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you always wanted one, but you never did get it. Well, guess what? We're adults now and we have jobs and we have our own, lives and whatever. So pretty much we can buy whatever we want to buy. So maybe you can go on eBay if it's an old school something and go buy it for yourself. Go get yourself a weenie whistle. I just remembered, what was his name on the Santa Claus with Tim Allen? I keep wanting to say Lloyd, but I can't remember the stepdad's name, but he always wanted a weenie whistle and he never got one as a kid, and then, so he hated Santa. He was anti-Santa. And then by the end of the movie, well, I'm ruining it for you if you haven't saw it, but whatever. Tim Allen, the Santa Claus, he puts him a weenie whistle in his little stocking or whatever. So it's friggin' hilarious. And it changes the whole movie by that, and, in that giving spirit or whatever. But anyways, okay. So like I said, this was kind of inspired by this original G.I. Joe aircraft carrier type of thing that I never got. And so, okay, let's dive in. I know you're going, okay, shut the heck up. Let's hear the list here. But one last thing, and I promise one last thing, follow us and leave us a comment on Spotify. If you follow us on Spotify and you're listening to this on Spotify right now, all you got to do is stop. And there's a spot there where you can post a question. You can leave feedback, a comment. I'd love to hear from you what your favorite gift was, what your favorite gift is that you never got or that you always wanted, or maybe something that you're giving or doing this Christmas that is awesome, or maybe just how much you like the podcast, whatever. But I'd love to hear from you. So, okay, let's kick this off with number one. We got 40 of them. So, and I only got about 28 minutes here to get through this. So I'm going to go through some I'll spend a little more time on because they're more sentimental. Some we're just going to kind of roll through, but we're going to get through all 40. And the first one, number one, here we go. Cabbage Patch Kids. The iconic soft-bodied dolls were the craze of the 1980s. And if you didn't get one, you were part of if you didn't get one, you were part of the toy battle of the decade where people were literally fighting over these things. And I do remember that because I'm not ashamed to admit this, dude. I was a kid. I had a Cabbage Patch doll and his name was Logan. And Logan was a firefighter. He was dressed in a fire outfit. And I don't even know how old I must have been 5, 6, somewhere around there. I was little because this was the early 80s. And I remember the Cabbage Patch Kid. And, there's a scene, if you have an eye like me and by the way, too, if you're watching this or you're seeing any clips of this, because this will probably get posted to YouTube, the video section, and then there'll also be clips on Instagram, you can see I'm wearing a Chicago Bears hat here. That's not because I'm a Chicago Bears fan. Okay, I don't hate the Bears. I'm not like a fan of the Bears. But if you don't recognize, this is the same exact hat that Clark W. Griswold wears in the best movie of all time, Christmas Vacation, which I have watched probably 40-something times already just this year alone. And we usually do that every year. But here's what I was going to say. Here's how this ties into the Cabbage Patch. If you look, there's a scene, and I like to do this and see what new things I can spot. There's a scene when Cousin Eddie and Clark are walking through a Walmart, and they're throwing all their dog food on the baskets, and he crushes the light bulbs, and he's talking about how he's broke and he rolled into town on fumes, and Clark offers to help him, get gifts for his kids. And if you look in that scene, though, it's a hilarious scene. Look in the background, and there's a whole palette of Cabbage Patch Kids. And that was one thing I spotted out, I don't know, in the last year or two that I'd never noticed before. And I want to say they're $29.99. Or I like doing that too, though, in old movies, looking at the price, and you can see how much the price has changed and stuff too. It's kind of a fun little pastime of mine. Yeah. All right. Moving right along. Number 2, the NES, Nintendo Entertainment System. And I remember when I got them, my parents were awesome. Look at that. I had Cabbage Patch Kids and I had the NES. I could just stop right there. I should be very satisfied. Thank you, Mom and Dad. You all did well. I know it wasn't perfect, back in the day. It was a little stressful at times, but man, you always had some damn good gifts for me and my sister. But the NES, if you didn't get an NES, you missed the console that started it all. Super Mario Brothers, Duck Hunt, and more came bundled with it. Remember, you got the pistol, and you could do the Duck Hunt game. You could play Super Mario. They had Excite Bike, Mike Tyson's Punch Out. You had Mega Man. Man, so many great games. What else was on there that I played? Kung Fu. That was another one of my favorite ones. Kung Fu was awesome. So many good games. Such a great time. That was just the hottest item to be able to get. And I want to say it was like $200 back then, which was a lot of money in the 80s. For a gift like that. So I do remember getting one of those. I don't know what my parents had to go through to get it, but they made it happen. So good stuff there. All right, number 3, the classic Rubik's Cube. This colorful, twisty puzzle became a global phenomenon and was found under nearly every tree during the 1980s. Yes, the Rubik's Cube, definitely a classic, definitely a toy that was iconic. I think that's a great word for it. And, personally, I did have a Rubik's Cube. It wasn't a huge deal. I don't remember being super pumped about a Rubik's Cube. I definitely remember there being cool. I remember my Uncle Matt had one. I think that was the first time I had ever saw one was at my grandma and grandpa's house when he still lived there, was a teenager. And I remember messing with it. And I think I played with it for about 5 minutes. And then I got real frustrated that I couldn't do it. So I just threw it on the ground and left. But those are one of those things, man. There's certain minds that can just do a Rubik's Cube in like 10 seconds. And that is pretty fascinating and incredible when you really think about it. That's not me. I could never complete it. It'd probably take me days, months. I'd have to cheat and go on like YouTube or something and figure out how the heck to do the Rubik's Cube, but definitely an iconic gift. All right, number 4. Oh man, this is one of my favorites right here. This is one of my favorites, guys. Number 4, the G.I. Joe action figure. Action figures that came with cool accessories, vehicles, and epic battle scenarios. The USS Flag aircraft carrier was the crown jewel that I never got. But that's okay. I got plenty of great gifts. And it was probably like 1 year. I don't remember like festering over the aircraft carrier, but I do remember 1 year thinking that would be so sick to have the G.I. Joe aircraft carrier. But man, you had Snake Eyes, you had Gung Ho, you had, man, who else? Sergeant Slaughter. There were so many fun G.I. Joes back in the day, and I had a great collection of them. I think I had the tank, the truck. I used to play with them in the bath when I was a kid too, man. Just make them fight. They'd be fighting each other and falling in the water and hiding behind the shampoo bottle and coming out just slaying fools. That was a good time, man, just playing and having some fun with the G.I. Joe action figures. And if anyone did, if you're listening to this and you did get the USS Flag aircraft carrier G.I. Joe special, please leave a comment in Spotify. I want to hear like that you got that, or even if you wanted it and you didn't get it, shoot, leave a comment in there too. But man, that was a huge, huge deal if you got one of those back in the day. All right, number 5, Star Wars action figures from Luke Skywalker to Boba Fett. Is that how you say it? Boba Fett. I'm not a huge Star Wars nerd guy. I don't know. Star Wars is awesome. Don't get me wrong. I just never like got into it as much as some people did. But the 80s saw the release of numerous Star Wars figures. The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, and action figures were highly coveted. Not only were they highly coveted, they're worth a lot of money today if you still have some of those things. Like a lot of these different action figures and different things. But they can be worth some loot if you have some of the originals and some of the old school action figures and things, even I think there's even cards, that Star Wars cards from back in the day that are worth some money too. But Star Wars, definitely a huge thing and definitely highly popular in the 80s. Just wasn't one of the things that I was super into. I was more of a G.I. Joe guy. Number 6, oh man, and I was more of a He-Man guy. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe figures. The strongman hero of He-Man was a staple for toy shelves with characters like Skeletor, Teela, and Battle Cat. I remember Battle Cat, man. Battle Cat was so fresh. I had a Battle Cat, and I got to tell you a funny story about He-Man. Well, you know what? Was it He-Man and Thunder? We'll save it for a different one. We're going to save that story because they kind of go together, but I'm going to wait on that. We're going to keep moving on. But He-Man was awesome. And if you had He-Man back in the day, you were just pumped as a kid because the cartoon was like so popular. Such a fun little toy and collection to have. All right, number 7, Atari 2600. Before the NES, there was Atari. It may have not had the same level of graphics, but it introduced generations to video gaming. Yes, it did. And I never owned an Atari, but my Uncle Matt and my grandma and grandpa did in Napa. And we visited there often. And I remember sitting down playing chicken down in I think that's what it was called. And you'd run across the road or whatever. And I just sat and played Atari down in the little den down there. And it was a fun time. Graphics were super crappy, but it was Atari. I mean, it didn't matter back then. You didn't know any better. So it was just awesome. All right, number 8. Oh, this is one of my favorites. Had so much fun running around the neighborhood in the summertime with these. Can you guess what it is? What do you think it is? Super Soaker 50, the classic, the super powered water gun that changed the game when it hit the scene. If you didn't get one, you were likely stuck with those lame, leaky ones, the crappy, like dollar ones, or maybe you got them from the Ice Cream Man or from Long's drug stores or something. I know my dad shopped there a lot back in the day, and I remember going there and they had, your cheap kind of imitation squirt guns, but the Super Soaker, when that thing came out, and then they came out with the whole line of them, just like the huge, like massive Super Soaker 250, or I don't even know what, Super Soaker 300, Super Soaker 3000. They were so fun though. Like get in the neighborhood, everyone had their Super Soakers. And then unfortunately there was always that poor sap that didn't have one. And so you tried to like pick on him and just like drench him because you had the Super Soaker. You were just better. You were more equipped. It's the best, the Super Soaker 50. All right, number 9. Oh man, another great one. This list is just epic. Number 9, the Sony Walkman CD player. Who remembers this? I had a yellow one. Do you remember the yellow Sony? It was like, it was a CD player. It was all yellow or partly yellow. Let's remember that. And then I had the classic headphones, and CD players at this time were the next big thing. And having a Sony Discman, you could even talk about the Walkman too. That was even before the Discman. But that meant you were pretty dang cool if you had a Walkman, and especially if you had a Discman. And now you could walk, you could bring music with you, listen to headphones. And remember, it was so big too, because think about how big a CD is. And for you youngsters out there, if there's any youngsters listening to this, going, what's a CD? CD's nuts. I'm just I couldn't help it. I'm sorry. But a CD was the disc, right? Smaller than a record. But man, it was super popular. We used to go to the warehouse and go CD shopping, and even mix tapes back in the day before that. But the CD Walkman, the Sony Walkman, was a huge deal. And if you had one, you were pretty dang cool. All right, number 10, Nintendo 64. The console that introduced 3D gaming with classics like Super Mario 64, GoldenEye, one of the best games ever, I have to say. If you played GoldenEye, man, let me know. You gotta make a comment, a mention of that. Legend of Zelda. Missing out on an N64 was like missing out on the very fabric of childhood gaming. And it really was. Mario Kart, that was another one. Mario Kart was epic on Nintendo 64. Such a fun game. You get with your buddies and all play on different screens. We used to do that with GoldenEye too. That was before online gaming was around, right? So what we would do with GoldenEye is you would have different TVs set up, and you could run like a line, and you could literally play in different rooms and play each other during GoldenEye, or for GoldenEye, which was James Bond, by the way, if you're not familiar. We just called it Bond. Does you want to get on some Bond? And we go play Bond or whatever. And man, that was a great time. So N64, another great gift that I believe I did. I had a lot of these gifts. I'm realizing now how much my mom and dad really must have loved me and wanted to do the best, man, that they could. So thank you guys again. I'm starting to have some gratitude in that area. I forget sometimes, you forget. You get all old and crusty in this jacked up world, and like you forget being a kid sometimes. Back to that childlike spirit, gratitude, freedom, joy. Man, it's amazing when you can tap into it. All right, number 11, Transformers, Robots in Disguise. Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, and Megatron were the stars of this action-packed toy line that transformed from cars into robots. And man, I had quite a few Transformers. I had all the ones, I believe, that were mentioned there. Optimus Prime, Bumblebee. I don't know if I had Megatron, actually. I know I had Bumblebee because I remember it was like a yellow Porsche. It looked like a Porsche at the time, and then it turned into a Bumblebee. So Transformers was a huge one. Used to watch that cartoon a lot as well. And always a good time. All right, number 12. Oh, man, this is a fun one. Tell me if you remember this. Mad Balls. Who remembers Mad Balls? Bizarre rubber balls that had gross out faces and were a huge hit in the 80s. I remember how popular these things were. You could buy different ones. You could collect them. You could trade them. You could throw them at each other. And they all had crazy faces on them. I had a couple Mad Balls back in the day. And that was a really, really cool toy, or cool, like nostalgic kind of what's the word? Ball? I guess it's not ball. That's not what I was thinking of, but it's a Mad Ball. It's a Mad Ball. You get it. It's kind of like, it was almost like a Beanie Babies type of thing in a sense. Although Beanie Babies got much bigger, obviously, Mad Balls was definitely very similar to that. And that'd be cool if they brought Mad Balls back. It's not. I just realized what's not on this list, and we'll get to that maybe later at the end if I can remember. All right, number 13, Speak and Spell. an educational toy that actually helped kids learn spelling and phonics, all while having fun time with its electronic voice. Really kind of the beginning stages of computers being offered to like the common citizen, where my grandma had one of these at the house, the Speak and Spell. And I remember she would kind of quiz us, and we'd do math problems, and we'd do different spelling things. And they had, just different options that you could use on there to help teach you in this computerized electronic voice, which was pretty neat. Number 14, the Razor scooter, the cool lightweight scooter that became a staple of 90s kids' outdoor play. The smooth glide and easy to learn tricks made it a must for anyone looking to be a scooter pro. And I had to go back and look at that. Like, wow, the Razor scooter has been around since the 90s. I didn't really realize that because they're still so popular today. I go over to the skate park with Cash, and there's so many kids. And mind you, I guess not a lot of them are necessarily riding Razors, because some of them, there's more of these upgraded versions that are more kind of street style and skate park style. But still a very popular and known item, the Razor scooter. How about the pogo ball? The pogo ball. A cross between a pogo stick and a balance ball. It was a balancing game that made jumping around a lot more challenging. I do remember the pogo ball. I don't know if my cousins had one of these. I remember being at my grandma's house and doing the pogo ball, and you kind of put it in between your feet, and then you just jumped around, kind of like a jackass, and didn't know, try not to fall. And I think they had bright colors, like the pogo ball in the middle, different colors and designs or whatever. But yeah, pretty fun. But kind of, I don't know. I wasn't really into like the pogo. I might hop on it and jump around a little bit and try not to fall on my face, but wasn't one of my favorites, but definitely an iconic one for that time. Number 16, laser tag, a real life laser tag set that lets you zap your friends with infrared light. It was like having a live-in sci-fi movie. And man, I remember those commercials, the laser tag commercials. I don't think I ever had an official laser tag set, but man, this thing was huge back in the day. And I remember there was a one Christmas in particular that was just like laser tag was the thing to get. And if you got it, you could set it up, and then you could have your buddies over and you could laser tag around the house, or you could laser tag out in the neighborhood. Man, it was a fun thing for sure. And then we just kind of got over the laser tag though, and we just started playing ditch instead. It was like tag or ditch or something along those lines, and just made it a little bit easier. But same kind of concept. But laser tag definitely a fun thing. Number 17, Polaroid camera. The Polaroid camera, instant photos. The Polaroid was a must-have for anyone who wanted to take pictures and immediately have a physical copy. Yes, it was not anything that I can remember being super pumped about, but I do remember the Polaroid camera being a hot item for many out there. Number 18. Ooh, do you remember this one? Hot Wheels tracks. Hot Wheels tracks. If you had Hot Wheels cars but didn't get the track set with the loops, jumps, and ramps, you missed out pretty much. Those tracks were cool. You connected them. They went around. They did loops, upside downs. You started off on a set, and they had really good marketing for this kind of crap back in the day too, because I remember having some of this stuff and watching the commercial, and it looked so fun, and it was so cool the way they did it. And then like, at the end, I'm like, dude, why? This isn't the same as that I thought it was. Like, why isn't this the same? It's not giving me the same vibe here. And it just didn't look, it was still fun. Don't get me wrong. But the Hot Wheels was definitely a great marketing scheme, but a good time too, if you collected Hot Wheels and that type of thing as well. Number 19, Lego space or castle sets. That's kind of nerdy. I don't know if I'm really, I was into Legos. I had a ton of Legos, but Lego space or castle sets, I don't know. It's not for me. I'm sure it's for others out there for sure. Legos were a staple for creativity, but the space and castle sets of the 80s were particularly coveted, which I didn't really know that actually. It doesn't surprise me that the space stuff was, like with the shuttle and all that kind of stuff, was extremely popular in the 80s for sure. But I didn't ever have any of those. I did have Legos though, and I still think Legos are awesome. Dude, do you know what I just found? I didn't get because I couldn't find it anywhere. It was sold out everywhere. They have the Home Alone house Lego set. It's a whole house of the replica of Home Alone. And it was the coolest thing. We looked at the Lego store here locally, and I couldn't find it there. I probably could find it online, but I haven't really looked too deep. It's probably jacked up the price on it or whatever, but definitely a cool little gift to have or give if you're into Home Alone and Legos. All right, number 20. We're halfway through. Number 20. I know you remember this one. Teddy Ruxpin. The animatronic bear that told stories was groundbreaking in tech and entertainment, and it was a hit among kids. Man, the Teddy Ruxpin. And I don't think I ever had a Teddy Ruxpin. I remember wanting one, and I want a Teddy Ruxpin. They were so hard to get, I remember. I do remember that, like, next to the Cabbage Patch, it was kind of that same thing. There were years, where it was just almost impossible to get one of those things. And you had to fight your way through. It reminds me of, what's the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Christmas movie where he's trying to get the doll or the cat, not the doll, but the superhero guy. Jingle All the Way. And it's Captain something, I can't remember, but he goes through and he's fighting. Sinbad's in it, and they're getting after trying to find the one last doll. It's kind of the same thing with this Teddy Ruxpin type of thing. Like, parents were going mad trying to get Teddy Ruxpin for their kids, and it was a huge, huge, huge gift if you got a Teddy Ruxpin one year. All right, number 21. Oh, this is what I got a lot of favorites on this list, as you could tell. Let's take a quick drink here. But this one's definitely at the top of my list, up there with the NES and the G.I. Joes. The BMX bike. The BMX bike. Who got their favorite BMX bike for Christmas one year? I know I did a couple years. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Thanks. I love you guys. If you were into biking, a BMX bike was a dream come true, whether for racing or for tricks. They were the 80s equivalent of skateboards. Like, everyone BMX'd back in the day, and you didn't want to have the Huffy. You did not want to be the kid with the Huffy rolling around the neighborhood. And if you were that kid, I'm so sorry that you were that kid with the Huffy. You're probably doing great now. You're probably doing better than me. But at the time, the Huffy was a big no-no. You wanted the GT. You wanted the Mongoose. You wanted the Diamondback. You wanted the Haro. You wanted anything but a Huffy. You wanted something that was cool. And if you had any of those, man, you were sitting pretty dang nice. And you can remember, I saw a meme yesterday, and it said, before phones and technology, whatever, this is how you knew where everyone was at in the neighborhood, because all of the bikes, all the BMX bikes were scattered around the lawn or the yard, and everyone was at that house, probably inside playing Super Mario Brothers or whatever. But then you always had that one friend who had the mountain bike, and you made fun of him. And you know it. Don't laugh. Don't lie. You know you did. You had that one friend, and you made fun of him, and you messed with him, and you told him, funny things about himself because he was whack and weak and, whatever, because he had a mountain bike. And man, sorry, we had one of those guys too, and I love him to death, but he wasn't fit for the BMX bike, I guess. I don't know. But man, that was one of the best gifts to get. And I remember one year getting the Diamondback. I think I can still remember the picture. I had it was all chrome, sweet, awesome bike, dude. BMX bike, number 21. Love it. All right, number 22. I love this one too. Micro Machines. Micro Machines. Are you kidding me? They were tiny. They were typically 1/64 scale or even smaller. And the vehicles, the collection ranged from cars, trucks, military vehicles, boats, planes, and helicopters. And of course, I mentioned marketing earlier. Micro Machines had some of the best marketing possible. I remember the guy, I don't remember his name, but he talked super fast, and he went through the whole Micro Machines spill, and the commercials were sick, and they had the big truck that could carry all your Micro Machines. And man, that was a pretty cool gift if you got some Micro Machines one year for Christmas as well. Number 23, Voltron. The lion-shaped robot that formed a gigantic defender of the universe. Kids love transforming action figures, and Voltron was definitely one of them. And I do remember a Voltron. I don't think I ever had a Voltron. Wasn't super into Voltron. I do remember the toys, and I do remember it being pretty popular, though. Number 24, the original Game Boy. The original Game Boy, the portable black and white handheld gaming Tetris, Super Mario Land, and more were all on this revolutionary console. And man, believe it or not, I had a lot of different gaming systems. I never had a Game Boy. I had other little, what were those? Man, I can't remember the brand, but they had the little baseball, like electronic games you could put in your pocket. I'm totally drawing a blank on the brand, but they made a bunch of them. There was like a whole line of them. They had baseball, they had football, they had all different ones. But I did have some of those, but I never had an original Game Boy. But that was such a popular item, such a revolutionary item too, to be able to kind of take your games on the go, which eventually turned into the Switch. And, it evolved over time. Graphics got better, everything got better. Games got better, all of it. So the original Game Boy was a pretty cool gift as well. All right. Number 25. Okay, this is the one from earlier that I said, okay, I'm going to wait and tell the story a little later because I think He-Man and this one went together, for me at least as a kid. How do you feel, or do you remember Thundercats? Thundercats action figures, like the animated series. These action figures brought characters like Lion-O, Tigra, and Panthro. Was it Panthro? Yeah, Panthro. I don't remember Panthro so much, but I definitely remember Thundercats. And man, I had a whole collection of them, as well as He-Man. And here's the story, okay? Gosh, I don't know. I was probably 6, 7, somewhere around there. I was living in Napa at the time, I believe, if I remember right. And my dad came home and he just had a box full of toys, like brand new toys, Thundercats, He-Man, G.I. Joe. I mean, all of this stuff. But I remember Thundercats in particularly. And there was a bunch of Thundercats ones, and some of them were brand new in the box. And so I remember going, man, how did he get all this? Like, how did all this? And so I didn't care at the time, though. Shoot, I just got a bunch of toys. Like, I was freaking stoked. I don't even think this was for Christmas at this time. This was just throughout the year. So now that I think about it later on, I think my dad worked at Gemco around that time, which was a store out in Concord in the Bay Area. And I started to wonder. I started to think about this and go, because apparently he was dumpster diving. That was the story that I had always thought. He was dumpster diving and he found all these toys. I'm like, man, that's so cool. Dumpster. And I know he did do that. That was big back in the day. It probably still is today, but you can find, like, the companies throw stuff out that is very useful still. They don't want to put it on the market, or it's outdated, or it's old. They'll throw stuff out. So people dumpster dive and they'll find some great quality items, as Cousin Eddie would say. That there's a quality item. I'd like to fumigate that there chair. How much it set you back? But so my dad comes home with all this stuff, and he was dumpster diving and he found it. Well, as I got a little older and started to think about that and have that memory, I said, I wonder if him and his buddies got together at old Gemco and decided to take the trash out. And man, there just happened to be a bunch of Thundercat figures in that trash. And later on, I don't know. I don't know if that's the case. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask my dad. I'm sure he'll be happy to tell me the real story behind it. And maybe that is the real story. Maybe he was just dumpster diving and came across a bunch of Thundercats. Like, I don't know. But regardless, I know I was one happy dude and got a hell of a lot of great Thundercats and He-Man toys all at once. So that was pretty cool. All right, number 26. Ooh, tell me if you remember this one. The glowworm. Glowworm. Said that a little weird there. A soft light-up toy that provided comfort and was often used as a night light for kids. I remember the glowworm. Who didn't have a glowworm? I feel like everybody had a glowworm. That was like the biggest, that was a huge craze. And I don't really think it was a extremely expensive item either. It may have been hard to find at first, but definitely a popular one. Number 27, Matchbox cars. Like Hot Wheels, Matchbox were highly collectible, and they often came with unique accessories like road signs, garages, and more. So here's the question here. Was Matchbox older than Hot Wheels? I think it was. I'm not positive on that. I should have looked that up. Didn't have a thought about it till just now. But I wasn't a Matchbox guy. I was a Hot Wheels guy. I liked Hot Wheels. Matchbox was kind of the off-brand. But I think that Matchbox may have been around even before Hot Wheels. So maybe Hot Wheels was the off-brand. I don't know. But regardless, any type of car was usually pretty dang fun for kids. Number 28, wrestling action figures. WWF figures featuring the likes of Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and the Ultimate Warrior dominated the 80s toy scene, and they sure did. I remember WWF wrestling on one of the gaming consoles. It may have been Nintendo. It may have been Super Nintendo. It may have been even 64. I mean, I guess they had them for all the systems. I was a Nintendo guy, by the way, just in case. I know there was some different consoles and stuff, and we may or may not get to one of those other ones here if you were one of the other ones here soon. But I was a Nintendo guy. I know WWE, WWF wrestling. I just remember the Ultimate Warrior was so huge during the 80s, and Hulk Hogan, of course. And it's funny, I never watched a lot of wrestling as a kid. I mean, I watched some of it. I just, there's those like wrestling, like some dudes were super into wrestling. And I wasn't not into it, but I also wasn't like super, super into it too. But it was fun. It was like WWF, all that. The figures, I had some of them. I remember, the ring at one point too. I think Cash had a WWE ring a few years back as well. He had like the figures, and he was super into it. We went to some wrestling events. Good times for sure. All right, number 29. I feel like this one's taken back like to when you're real little, but the big wheel, the low rider tricycle that you could zoom around on was a must-have for kids looking to ride something and go fast and have fun. So the big wheel was super popular. I feel like that was even before the 80s for some reason. I'm not sure what year that was, but the big wheel was definitely popular. And I've even seen adult big wheels. There's a group, I don't know what their little team is called or whatever, but I've seen them riding around on Instagram doing what's it called when you drift? Yeah, they'll kind of drift on, and they got these like man-size big wheels that haul ass. They actually look pretty dang fun. But the big wheel for a kid, man, you were rolling in style if you had a big wheel. All right, number 30. We got 10 to go. 10 to go here. Number 30, He-Man's Castle Grayskull. How many of you had He-Man's Castle Grayskull? I so remember the commercial. I remember the ad. I remember the box. A must-have for any He-Man fan. This was the ultimate play set for defending Eternia. That was the name, wasn't it? Yeah, I didn't really remember that. I just acted like I did. I didn't remember it was Eternia. I was a He-Man fan. I just didn't remember the name. But the Grayskull Castle, I do remember that. All right, number 31, a good old classic here. The old classic Etch-a-Sketch, an iconic drawing toy that allowed you to create art with a simple twist of the knobs. If you didn't get one, it was a classic stocking stuffer. It was the Etch-a-Sketch. I don't remember getting an Etch-a-Sketch. Wasn't really into it. Definitely used one before. It was fun. It was cool for about 5 minutes. Then I was over it, probably ready to move on to something a little more exciting. But the Etch-a-Sketch. All right, number 32. Simon electronic game. Does anyone remember Simon? A memory game that was deceptively simple. Repeat the flashing light sequence. Hours of entertainment for the family. And I do remember, I didn't personally have a Simon, but at one of my grandma's house had a Simon there. And I remember playing it, and I remember it being very popular, and the colors lit up. So it was very visually appealing, and it kind of got you hooked too, if you could see how many times you could remember. So it tested your memory. It's one thing I'm thinking about as I'm going through this list too. A lot of these games, the games and different, even some of the toys, like they were meant to get you thinking and meant to exercise your brain at the same time. So I think those are really good, toys back then. Maybe I'm out of the loop and they have stuff like that now, but I just feel like everything is so digitally based, that it's kind of a bummer. I do think though, at some point that the digital space is just going to be too much for people. It already is for a lot of people. I know it is for me. And as much as I love it, I mean, I'm speaking and able to do this podcast because of the digital space. So there's a lot of pros, to it. But there's also some cons to it too, where it really distracts us and takes us out of the moment, takes us out of reality. It's an easy way to numb out depending on what it is. whether it's games or shopping or, just being online, just always being connected to something. Whereas some of the stuff like, Simon, this handheld game that's actually testing your memory as you're playing it and you're growing and getting better. The Rubik's Cube, another good example, testing your IQ, testing your mathematical genius skills. So just some cool things to think about. And man, maybe we bring some of them back. Who knows? All right, number 33. Here you are. If you're not a Nintendo guy, the Sega Genesis with Sonic the Hedgehog. If you didn't get this classic gaming console, you missed out on one of the defining platforms of the early 1990s. I just remembered this. This is so random, but there was a kid named Jonathan in, what was his last name? I can't remember his last name now, but Jonathan was in elementary school with us. And somehow or another, he was the Sega kid. He was in the Sega Genesis commercial. And I don't know if he did other commercials, but I definitely know he was in it. And, oh, Jonathan, Sega. Yeah, he was in the Sega commercial. Yo, yeah, Jonathan. Like, he was like, he was cool because he was in the Sega Genesis commercial. And Sega, man, that was like the nemesis of the NES. You were either a Sega kid or you were a Nintendo kid. And they were both cool. They both had good things about them. But I was definitely a Nintendo kid and liked Nintendo. And, there was some good things on Sega. I think I played Sonic a little bit. They had a dolphin game on Sega Genesis that was cool. My buddy Kyle had. My buddy Kyle was a Sega guy. I was actually just talking to him in our group text. Man, we have a childhood text. Me, Kyle, Ryan, Dave, and Aaron. And Aaron goes by the name Muff. A lot of people don't know Aaron as Aaron either. You'd be like, hey, Aaron. He's like, who's Aaron? Muff. Oh, yeah, Muff. I won't tell you how he got the name Muff either. We'll save that since this is a G-rated show today, but you can only imagine. But we all played games back in the day, man. It was so much fun. But Kyle was definitely a Sega kid. Played a lot of hockey. We played baseball. He always kicked our ass too, usually at all the games. We'd always get mad. But yeah, Nintendo guy, no doubt. Sega, still cool though. All right, number 34, RC cars, baby. Remote control cars were a huge hit in the 80s, especially if you could race them with your friends. And I remember, I love talking about Uncle Matt. He's came up a few times today, and may he rest in peace. I miss him. I was actually just driving recently. I had to head back into California for some different work stuff. And, I'm kind of back and forth out of state and into California for work and staying in both spots. And it's a little bit stressful sometimes, but, it's what has to happen now. But I have to go through Reno, and my uncle used to live in Sparks before he passed away just this last year. But he was so awesome. And I remember, the RC cars he had back in the day, he would build them in the 80s. That was huge. And it still is today. I know there's a huge community for it. But I just remember being a kid and Uncle Matt's RC car was so sick. It was so fast. Like he jumped it. He did all these different, just like raced it and he souped it up. And I remember going to Toys R Us. Isn't that so crazy? Toys R Us. Do you remember that? I remember going to Toys R Us in Fairfield, California as a kid. And they had a whole aisle full of RC trucks and cars and boats and just they were hundreds of dollars. They were super expensive back then. But I remember those are so cool. They're just so sick, like to have just this bad RC car. And I never did get into it fully, but at the same time, it was fun to watch other kids get into it. There were some kids in the neighborhood that had them, and then I saw Uncle Matt's along the way too. But that was definitely a cool gift to get as a kid. All right, 5 to go. Number 35, troll dolls. This one was, I don't know. This wasn't, I did have a Raiders troll doll. I remember, I don't know where I got it from, but do you remember the colorful dolls with wild hair that became so popular in the late 80s? And whenever I think of toy dolls, the only thing I really think of is like old ladies in bingo. And there's just like bingo, and there's just a whole line of troll dolls there. They're troll collections for good luck, and they're playing bingo, drinking coffee, and maybe having a couple cigarettes during break. Bingo. That's what troll dolls kind of reminds me of. It wasn't a big troll. I don't know. It made the list. Number 35, whatever. We're getting through it. We got a few to go. All right, number 36, electronic battleship. You sunk my battleship. Remember that commercial? Another great marketing scheme there. The classic game now with an electronic version that let you sink ships with just the press of a button. That was always a fun one too. Number 37, Star Wars, The Return of the Jedi play sets. I'm not going to go too deep into this one because, like I said before, I wasn't huge into Star Wars. Maybe you were, though, and maybe you had the Return of the Jedi play set. That would have been another addition to all the other original Star Wars figures and action items that were highly collectible and still are till today. So definitely a good one if you were a Star Wars nerd. 38, Laser Maze, a laser-based puzzle that challenged your ability to guide the laser to the target. You know, I was not a big laser maze person, but I know that it was popular for some kids. I did have a buddy who was into laser maze. I never really got it, but in any case. Okay, 2 left, and these last 2, I put them at the bottom because they are probably in my top 5, top 10 out of this whole list. And the first one, number 39, Mask. Mask vehicles and figures. If you remember Mask, you are my friend. Mask is the mighty power that could save the day. Do you remember that? That was like the line of vehicles that could change into battle machines. It was loved by kids who were both into action figures and vehicles. You had a kind of a combo of the both. They had their helmets that you put on. They had little it was so cool. And there was a cartoon. I remember watching Mask like when I was a kid, and I was so pumped on it and so pumped to get those different figurines and have a little collection of them. All right, number 40, last but not least, number 40, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures. These were absolutely huge. Absolutely huge. The movie, huge. And then as they started getting the action figures out, oh, good Lord, man, I had so many Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle action figures. Shredder, April O'Neil, Donatello, Michelangelo, Master Splinter, mimicking my master's moves from my cage. So funny. I remember that part in the movie, and there's this little freaking rat. He's like doing karate in the cage. So freaking great. But man, what a good time reminiscing, about the old toys and the old, just gifts and holidays. And man, I got to say, just to add on a little bit for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles as we wrap this up, the 90s were kind of the golden era of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And if you had that set, if you were into it, you probably have some great memories of playing with those with friends and around, in your room or in wherever you are at your buddy's house and collecting and watching the movies and the cartoons. And man, that was a really, really fun time. So I hope you enjoyed 40 80s and 90s Christmas gifts that you might not have gotten, but still secretly wish you did. And man, what a great time. I really enjoyed going down that list with you. So I hope you found that fun and light and joyful, and you have a great holiday season. And be sure to drop us a comment on Spotify. If you're listening to this on Spotify, and be sure to give us a follow as well. One last reminder, you can sign up for our free Sober Guy Men's Community, the Victory Circle, and then also register for this month's free monthly workshop where we're just going to kick back and enjoy some holiday chat with some NA drinks all together in that online space. So I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much again for tuning in. And you guys have a great holiday season. And man, until next time, keep your blood clean.